For those who have not yet heard me, I was born with an ability to see other levels of fields that I realized quite young others did not experience the same. I was fortunate enough to be born into theosophical parents, actually a third generation theosophist. My parents were introduced to theosophy by my mother's aunt, and we happened to call her grandma. But she discovered it sometime in the 30s or 40s. I'm 70, so I was born in 46. And as I lived in Portland, Oregon, and we attended, at that time, the Theosophical Society had a roundtable. So from a very early age, that's where I spent my Sundays with my fellow friends, a small group, and it's basically evolved. I mean, it was young theosophists. So I am not an expert in theosophy, but it has been my life. And as I understand it, of course, it's been with the teachers that I have had. I was fortunate in my youth to have been introduced at a young age to Dora Kuntz and her brother Harry Van Gelder, and of course in Portland, Perry and Edith Karsten and Anna Berkey, many people who have the gift of sight or clairvoyance and could guide me as a child in a world that was, well, it wasn't mysterious, it was quite exciting, it was lots of fun. And as a child, I experienced the colors and the gnomes and the fairies and all of these things that I just simply did. It was just natural, it was just what I did and who I was. It was not something, though, I was very protective of this information, and I remember earnestly telling my parents that this needed to be quiet information. I was terrified of being not exploited, but used. And I realized that there was a vulnerability. And there were moments when I would be asked a question, such as someone saying, what does that person's aura look like? Another person's aura. Well, that's very personal business. And I also learned at a young age that it was something I could turn off and on, which of course was very helpful, because as a young teenager, we're not using this in high school. We're just surviving in high school. So at a fairly young age, I recognized that people would say one thing and actually look differently than they were speaking. And no, you don't say, no, that's not what you meant. You just are silent, and then you discern later on what was the truth of that particular interchange. The reason I really like this topic of demystifying it is that clairvoyance is just something that I was born with. I obviously developed it over other incarnations. And I've also always been in some kind of healing. When I joined, when I finally became a chiropractor, it was just old gloves, and hands-on is the direction that I needed to be. So this is just a continuation of what I've done in the past, I'm quite sure. However, sometimes I've had experiences where someone will look at me in a more revered way than I need to be looked at. I'm just me, and you are just you, and we all have our own sensitivities. This just happens to be mine. What I discovered also is, in looking and exploring, all children are born with sight. Most animals, not most, all animals that I've seen, personally, have I looked at cows and sheep? I'm not sure. Okay, cats, dogs. I probably as a youth, oh yes, I did look at cows, yes, they do. So they're very comfortable in not just what you and I use our eyeballs for. And sight, my sight, is nothing to do with my eyeballs. In fact, if I look too carefully at it, why, it dissipates just like vapor. You've all had the experience of flitting motion. Well, that's really what it is. Or a color, or a smell, or hearing a voice. As a child, I learned how to question, to see what was real and what wasn't real. I didn't want to waste my time with imagination. I mean, imagination is fun, but I wanted to be clear about and I learned different techniques in looking at an experience that if, for instance, you've all had the experience of a dream that was very profound, and in the morning after the dream, you're still ruminating over the meaning or the words. Well, if in several months you're still ruminating and thinking about it, undoubtedly it was a real experience. It wasn't just a product of myriad of thoughts. Well, it's the same thing with visions or sight or experiences or sounds or even smells. Sometimes it's taken me years to go back and view an experience I've had and say, I think this part was real. I think maybe this part I was making up. That was a little more fanciful. So it's a chance. You are testing, and as humans, we need to test to find out what's real and what isn't real. So, in looking at sights, or I always just say my sensitivities, well, if you look at history, of course, back in the Roman Empire used seers, they used mystics to determine their wars, they determined who was going to be the political hierarchy. I mean, they were very, very revered and used in their entire Roman Empire of 500 and some years. The Greek dynasty used the Oracle of Delphi. So here we are in that whole era of using those with sight, and often it's always considered, oh, we're looking at the future, we're seeing the future. Well, future is very difficult to see. However, these oracles would help the Greeks, or the seers would help the Romans determine who would be the winner of a particular battle. I just found it fascinating that during those early era, and of course look at North America and the shaman, and the Aborigines shaman, and the runes. We've all are familiar with the runes. Were clear back in AD, and were used actually mystically. The tarot actually started as a card game, but now then became and was used mystically. Of course, then during the 15th century in Europe, things changed. Often women were, I suppose if you didn't like your neighbor, you simply said she was possessed. And all you had to do is just hint that someone had another ability, and they were considered devil worshippers or works of the demons, or demons were possessing them. And so we had a kind of a rocky time. I'm glad I don't think I was during that time. And it actually, unless you were a priest, now priests were allowed to have visions, and were allowed to hear, and were allowed to talk about it. But if you were not part of the priest community, why then somebody else had a hold of you, and you might not be speaking the truth, and somehow bad things were occurring. Well, this whole witch period, it was called the Witchcraft Act in 1542 in England. Kind of frightening. They actually estimate that over 40,000, mostly women, lost their lives. And they had fairly horrible ways to determine whether or not they were possessed, such as putting them in water, and if they sunk, they were okay, but if they floated, oh, God forbid. Of course, if you have any fat on your body, you're going to float. So there you go. I'd have been a floater. So that's kind of awful, but that was part of our heritage. And of course, Now here's 1492, and we have the Puritans who come to America for religious freedom. And of course they meet the Native Americans, and the first thing they do is, oh, no, 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 no. We don't have shamans. We don't, you're outside of the world. And of course, I think we as Theosophists understand, I hope more clearly, it's fear, simply. If we don't understand something, then we become fearful of it, and then it's quick to judge. And of course, I don't think the Puritans meant to be quite the way they were, but things weren't quite so good during those early times. Sadly, I mean, the Salem witch trials in Massachusetts were 1692. So around the early 1700s, things started changing. Around mid-1700s, things started changing. And of course, I find it interesting. Again, I'm not a theosophical historian, but the beginnings of theosophy is mid-1800s. And of course, we have Blavatsky, and we have Colonel Olcott, and we have all of this fantastic information that was not, well, no one was burned or put on a stake, but we were allowed in our development to start moving towards not the terror of someone with other gifts, but more of an acceptance. And I find now, of course, interestingly, I think as a world, we are thinking more alternatively. We certainly are in medicine. I mean, since I've been in chiropractic in nearly 40 years, alternative medicine is just a way of life. We no longer think our medical is our only hope. We have a naturopathy, we have acupuncture, we have chiropractic, we have all kinds of natural healing directions that fit with alternative thinking. Well, now we can more comfortably talk. Okay, I'm born in 46, certainly didn't talk about this until probably sometime in my 40s. 50s, more open. By the time I'm 60, who cares? So, I'm more comfortable with who I am, and am more comfortable speaking to groups that I don't know, and less concerned with how I'm received, only that maybe there's a nugget of what I say takes you to a new thinking or a new understanding. Sight is a privilege. Sensitivity is a privilege. It's a privilege and it's a responsibility. We all have a degree of understanding and intuition, and it's very important that we respect the intuition and also respect basic humanity, kindness. You may know something about someone or sense something about someone who is not ready to speak of it. It's not you to bring it up. It's not your place. It is your place to be understanding and accepting of the others and their thoughts and their directions. I kind of think that's the whole basis. I love our ideas in theosophy. I love that universal brotherhood. I love that thought. I think especially in this day and age, and especially in our America, the universal brotherhood is such a wonderful concept. So for me, theosophy just makes sense. Incarnations just make sense. The experiences I've had seem to dovetail quite nicely with the experience that I've seen and I've heard from others. So we know in theosophy we have, of course, the universal brotherhood, the study of comparative religions, and of course the end of it, the investigation of the unexplained laws of nature. Well, I'm kind of the unexplained law of nature. I mean, think about it. You can't see X-rays, but they exist. We can't see atoms and molecules, but we know they exist. Well, just because I can see a little differently than you or you or you doesn't mean that my sight is any less effective or more effective. It's just slightly different. It's just a slightly different look on things. Creative intelligence is in this whole arena. When I was taking organic chemistry, I mean, ugh. My husband's a chemist. He understands all of this so much better, but I do remember in organic chemistry reading about, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but it's Frederick Kekuli from Germany, who basically was a chemist. And he was I just love this little piece, and I'm just going to read this if you don't mind. He had 2 distinct dreams in his life at key moments of study. The first was of dancing atoms, moving around linked to one another. The second was linked atoms forming a snake that eventually became a ring, the snake eating the tail. When he woke, he realized it was pivotal, and he created the benzene ring. So it's 6 carbons with alternating double and single bonds with 6 hydrogens. Well, the benzene ring is a basic phenomenon or a basic principle of organic chemistry, and it's in alcohol and chloroform, and it's the thing, and it's the one thing in organic chemistry I remembered because I just thought, oh wow, there it is. And think of the stories of those that we have read of who have been inspired. It is that they have been open to that vast knowledge and have brought forth a new direction, a new thought. And sometimes, of course, persecuted along the way or criticized along the way, but if they stayed on that thought, it eventually becomes a new direction or a new language or a new movement. So we all have the ability. It's a matter of respecting that ability and then moving forward with enhancing it. Meditation is key in theosophy, and it is key in my life and many others. Meditation can also simply be prayer. It is a moment in time when you lose the facade of the personality and the ego, and you become who you really are. Now, without a doubt, there's some personality up here because there's some nerves. I'm talking in front of people I don't know. But a lot that's coming through is not part of that personality. She shines. The other part shivers, just like you do when you're thinking of something new. Meditation is that moment in time. It can be a controlled environment that you create, that you spend your moments either listening to music or chanting or simply going through your method of, again, becoming one with the universe, outside of you, embracing those entities around you, and both physical and non-physical. The development of an assimilation of us as characters, as people, depend on those quiet moments. The quiet moments help us through transition. When we mature, as you well remember, many times in your life, simply stubbing your toe on something, a direction you really want to go, but the door just won't open. But if you stop and take a breath and realize, well, wait a minute, maybe that door isn't open, but this one is. And when that door opens, it seems like, oh, there it is. That's what meditation in quiet moments, I like Dora Kuntz always said, meditation isn't necessarily a controlled time. It's a moment when you are outside of self. It can be listening to music, can be seeing a sunset or a sunrise. It can be hearing a poem. It can be listening to the rain. You've lost yourself. You've had that moment, and we've all experienced it. If you've not used meditation or prayer, I urge you to consider adopting it, because it helps you be clear on your own personal path. We all have directions. We all have uses. We're all of use to humanity. And we are all evolving. And we are only evolved as far as our slowest person. So we want to, as a group, enhance ourselves. The thing I love about Theosophy and Theosophists is that often we will stop and have a moment of meditative quiet. And at that moment, we all join. And we join forever the groups that are around us. All of us have individual helpers. We have devas, we have those have passed, we have folks that have never been here. I call them folks. They have kind of materialized and kind of look like people, but they aren't really. We all have them. We all have collections. We kind of come in as a group. You're not just all these physical bodies. You're like really big. There's lots of you here. And there are lots of you, and you're some of them skeptic. It's fine. It doesn't matter. It's really okay. That's actually good. Questioning is wonderful. You don't know your path unless you continue to question. Well, those entities that you bring with you all through life are also there to help you. But they cannot interfere unless you ask for it. And often in meditation, part of what we are meditating or part of what we're doing is we are asking for guidance to be the best possible you. I hope my next incarnation, I don't have to stub my toe over the things I've had to this time. I'm hoping that I'm a better version of myself, whatever self that might be. I don't know anyone who's going to be sprouting wings anytime soon, so I think we're all here for the long run, or at least we're here for a while. So if you haven't adopted a prayer or a chant or even a quiet moment, as you are realizing and understanding, yes, I do have these sensitivities, and what she's really saying is she's validating them. Don't discount them. Don't discount the green. Don't discount why this person suddenly turned to you in the middle of a line and said something that turned out to be quite profound. I remember years ago in practice, I had a young man I was working with, got him cleared up. Nice young man, just lovely young man. And my husband and I were in some kind of concert, and I hadn't seen him for, I don't know, several months. And all of a sudden, and this happens fairly often, and I'm in the concert, and all of a sudden here he is in front of me. And Dr. Finseth, that's all he knew me as. Dr. Finseth, I'm in trouble, I'm in trouble, I'm in trouble. And it was fairly jarring. I don't remember anything about the concert, but I then just went into my state and he was on fire. Well, it turned out he had been in an automobile accident, a fiery automobile accident. And I didn't know what to do. So I just visualized aloe vera. I just didn't know what to do. He was telling me he was on fire, and yet he had to have been gone. So I just visualized a huge vat of aloe vera, and then he disappeared. Now, I followed up, don't know when, a short time after that in meditation, and he was having difficulty contacting his family because they were in such heavy grief, he couldn't get past the barrier. And so I have many friends, and he connected up with them, and he couldn't connect. His girlfriend apparently was the driver, and she had such guilt over it that she was in this wall of, anyway, I don't know what happened with her. I just worked primarily, I didn't even know her at the time, but he couldn't get to her, he couldn't get to his family, and he was kind of lost. Well, this all happened in my world. This is not an unusual world for me. Well, then maybe, I'm going to say several months later, again, Gary and I were in a restaurant, and I was we were just having pancakes, and I looked up, And this young man looked at me, and I just knew it was him. Not really, but it was like through him, and it was, I'm okay. And that was it. And it was like, oh, how lovely. I mean, it was just, so my point of the story is, I'm validating those experiences you've already had. Our loved ones really do and are interested in us. They really do hang around. They are very interested in what you're doing and are wanting to continue to help, and they aren't of judgment. We, in our physical bodies, in our personalities, well, we have well-honed self-judgment, do we not? We've got self-criticism down to the gnat's eye. We know how to criticize self better than anyone. As we pass, as we leave this earth, we finally leave self-criticism. Well, wouldn't it be lovely to leave it now? That's what meditation helps you with. It allows you to get outside of self and allows you to see self realistically, comfortably, without judgment. Balance. We use meditation really for three things. We begin with love, always. Love is the great equalizer. Love is the great healer. Love is the great brotherhood. When we love, we have no criticisms. We just love. And love is a beautiful color, and all I have to do is say the word, and it's there. It's just there. We've experienced it, we know it, we've felt it, we bring it in, we know it. We know a few other things, but love is that lovely beginning. Love allows us to move to harmony. And harmony allows us to move to peace. And when we have those three, we are open to the universe, to your minds, to my mind, to my experiences and your experiences. Sensitivities are with us all. And we develop at the rate of time and speed to which we can handle. If you all had my ability, if I could whisk and say, now let me tell you, it would be very overwhelming. It would be very scary. It would be very unnerving. So we all develop somewhere along the line that which we can do. We cannot develop any faster than we're able to. I didn't just develop this. I was born with it. So somewhere along my incarnations, I'm in the healing world, it has just manifested. Now in my world, I use it every day. I use it to help people to understand themselves, or I have people in pain. Physical, mental, psychological. Pain is pain, and pain is very real. And my job, if I can see something and I can help translate it, generally it's the most helpful path someone can take. Not always can I remove the pain. Sometimes that's karma. We have so many aspects of our existence. We aren't just now. We are many nows. Harry once said that Harry Van Gelder was really my major teacher in my life, and he was an osteopath, engineer, and those who knew Dora or Harry knew also their idiosyncrasies and their manners of speaking. And Harry once said, and it made such sense to me, he says, well, there's about 200 of us, and we all incarnate together. And I sometimes, like, when I get a new patient, I think, do I know you? Have I met you before? You know, was I on a mountaintop and you were washing my feet and I'm now, you know, helping you? Many times, I'm sure in your life, when you feel overwhelmed, usually it's in transition, the transition of a job or a relationship or just self. It's so unnerving. And at that moment, you just kind of want to escape. And of course, my escape always been, oh, could I just go back to a mountaintop in Tibet and just meditate all day long? It just seems lovely, although that is not where we get growth. Growth is right here. And growth is right here in the physical plane. This is a very important time. We aren't just working to death. We are helping this entity that I'm here right now, this person who's now Robin, who knows who she'll be or he'll be next time. But I hope that these experiences I've had will just keep continuing to grow. In my 20s, I would never have believed that I would be sitting here and speaking to you of something so personal. So, in summary, clairvoyance is really simply an ability that I was born with. It's nothing any greater or better or worse than anything else. Sometimes it's worse. It is just my ability in what I'm doing in my work. I appreciate so much the society because I feel completely normal in the society. This would not be a public lecture many places for me. I encourage you, as I said before, to reintroduce your quiet moments and understand that the reasons you have them is to help this self that you have be a better version. We all want to be a slightly better version that we were before.
Can you give us some concrete examples of your clairvoyance from your practice?
Well, if you came into me as a patient, then you at some level are giving me permission to look at you at all levels. So I actually have a very developed touch. I kind of call my hands x-rays. I have an ability to put my hands on your knee and I just have the ability to understand exactly what's in the knee. So I use touch because you've given me permission to touch you. And I use sight, although I've not asked you if I may look at you. You have given me permission by simply asking to be in my practice. So I use all of it, including the folks you bring in with you. So, concrete examples. When someone's in pain, generally they come to someone like me. And my job is to locate what the pain is and to help that patient get beyond the pain, either correct the problem or understand why the problem exists. So I use that. I turn this off and on. It's not on full time. It's at all. Never in malls or flying or sometimes I get caught off guard. And but I'm very careful. But that's when I'm in my practice, I have wonderful protection. I've got wonderful devas. The people that I don't think should be there are referred on. That's how I use it. You've given me permission. Does that answer?
Well, I was thinking clairvoyance, finding missing children, or predicting lottery results or election results.
Yeah, that future. I am not that level of seer. What would I do with it? Yes, I found missing items. I have never put myself in a position of trying to find a lost child. I'm not sure I've got the nature to do it. I get caught in the emotion as much as the person who's lost the child. So I don't think I have the makeup to be able to do it, but I'm sure that there are very skilled examples of people who can do that. But that's a little bit more like a parlor trick, not the missing child, but find my missing scarf. And I don't do parlor tricks.
Thank you.
I have one question from someone listening online. Have you ever looked at benzene with your sight? And if you have, did you actually see a ring?
I have not. I never even tried. I thought it was fascinating. No, never did.
Could you tell us a little bit about your parents and your family? Did this run in your family? And if so, were they healers as well? How did you center on the healing aspect of the gift?
Well, no, my father was an engineer, my mother was a teacher, and neither of them had sight. Actually, when I was a very little girl, and I'm just remembering it was around 7, my mother had cancer. I just knew she was very sick. I have memories of her making broth at the stove. And someone in the society told her about Harry Van Gelder, who at the time was practicing in Vancouver, BC. And he was using radionics. And radionics in this world is not discussed because it's illegal to use radionics. But Harry was renowned for getting incredible results. And I remember as a little girl going up to Canada and seeing this funny man and his family. But I remember the first time that he worked on me, I remember saying, that's what I want to do. And that's how it all began.
What is radionics?
Oh, it's, we are vibrational. That's measured. Every cell has a vibration. And a radionics is the measurement of that level of vibration. And it equalizes. It's like a sine wave. If when I put my hands on someone who is ill, it can be either way. It can be frenetic, so the vibration is frenetic, or it can be subdued or flat. And so the idea of radionics is that it would bring the flat up, or it would bring the frenetic down and create the normal wave. So it was, I cannot tell you the science of it. I just know that that was what it was used for, was the changing of the field. Now, when my mother returned, we left, I think we were there for 2 weeks, and my mother stayed for another 6, or a total of 6 weeks. When she came home, and now, okay, so this was in the 50s, when she came home and went back to a medical doctor, he basically said, oh, you must have been misdiagnosed. Because in those days, of course, we didn't have the bombardment of the same things we do now with cancer, nor the diagnostics that we, so in some respects, we lucked out with my mom, and my mother did not die of cancer. That's how it all began for me. My father is sensitive. My father's no longer living, but he was very interested in healing, and he was very interested in his sensitivities, but he didn't have sight.
Did you have children?
Yes, I have a son.
Is he?
Yes, he thinks I've dropped the ball. That I didn't want to interfere. I just didn't know what to do. I mean, I knew that, it's like I watched with my grandson. I know he has the sensitivities, but I don't really know how to develop it. No one taught me, I just did. So, and my son is very sensitive. He would say he isn't, but he is. He's quite sensitive. He just wouldn't claim it. And I really only say I'm sensitive. I don't usually even use the term clairvoyant.
Thank you for what you said about meditation. I thought that was really a beautiful way to explain it to me, because I've always had a hard time calming down or, just making sense of it. So I thought that was really cool. So you say that when you go to malls, you turn it on and off. What do you do for that? And then you mentioned protection. So what do you also do to have that?
So are you saying that sometimes when you're in malls, it bothers you?
So I guess I guess I'm opening up to certain things, or I'm becoming more open. And I was talking to somebody who had a gift, and they were telling me that I'm very sensitive, and that the reason I've been having some of my issues or depression was because of the fact that I can't tell what's mine and what's not, and that most of it really wasn't. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's helpful. So I'm wondering, and she was saying that because of who I am and the way I'm made up, I don't necessarily have the cocoon that others have.
There we go.
So, and she goes, you have to go out of your way to create that. So now I'm just wondering, what do you do? And I've heard other people mention protection and stuff like that. So,
Great question. My sister was drop dead gorgeous as a child and as a young woman, and had boys falling all over her for her attention. And she had trouble with bombardments, is what you're talking about. And I helped her through that. And you basically allow visualization to be your friend. And one of the greatest gifts is visualizing a mirror. The lead part is towards you. The mirror is there. So if someone is sending you energy, or if you're suspecting, it's always by the solar plexus. You just visualize a mirror, and it reflects back at them. It's not yours. I taught my sister how to create a wall, and it's a swirl, and it's counterclockwise, a swirl. Always leave the top open. But you basically, anything you visualize is really you can create. And it's not just a fantasy, it's real. It creates real. I have, and if you've ever observed that I start to do this, it's just simply because it's gotten too much. And I just close it down. And ask for help.
A question from someone through the internet is, are our departed relatives aware of our lives?
Very. They're very aware.
So I'm curious if you have advice on the kind of meditation practice that I might do to inquire into my own, issues or pain. And I've tried to sit and go, okay, where is this coming from? What's the message that it's telling me? But I don't have a lot of luck. It's like silence. So I'm curious if you have any advice on how to look more deeply into, like a stomach pain or a neck pain or something like that, and what is its lesson?
When we have a question, and it can be any kind of question, I have found that it's very helpful if just prior to sleeping you put the question out there. You don't ruminate, you don't dissect it. You simply say, where is the stomach pain coming from? And then first thing in the morning, what's your first impression? You do it night after night after night. You'll find that you'll have a pattern in the morning of, you're probably getting more answers than you realize you have. Sleep is probably I'm going to say one of the most important parts of healing, sleep. We need sleep because the brain needs the clearinghouse. The adage of before you speak, sleep on it. It's because the brain is actually filtering your emotions. So when you wake in the morning, that's why it's like you're already working on this message or this problem or this concern. You don't have to keep reiterating it. In the morning, you are refreshed. Then see what you think of that question and see if that helps.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. I just wanted to clarify. You can see people's auras?
Yes.
Okay. How do auras change? Is it based on the person's emotional state, their enlightenment? What are they like?
We're born with, let's see, there's so many levels, so many different densities to it. And we're born with the basic nature of how we're going to look. Emotionally, it'll shift. It shifts like the wind. It's like when I mentioned love, it was like it was there. It really is, you know, depending on the speaker. And I mean, Dora and Harry's were huge, but you know, generally they're about here. I mean, there's different levels to it. The one that I am probably most concerned with is the etheric, which is the one that's closest. My dad used to call them feathers. He'd say how my feathers look today, and as you're sick, they flatten. And something that I've observed recently is that as you are approaching death, they curl up. I found that fascinating. I just observed it in someone. I just happened to see someone shortly before they died, and I realized they were just all curled up. So they weren't flat; they were curled up. I thought I can't explain why. So it changes emotionally. It'll change with your mood. Tempers are terrible things. We can be short-tempered also, and it's that flash of red. It's not pretty, and we can feel it. And it actually, there's thunderbolts. You know, it's not a real pretty thing, and it's interesting looking. But the basic, the work is usually in this arena, and our work is green. It's our work color. Our more basic is the earthier colors, and they're lower, and then the more enlightened we are, the higher it goes, and there are sparkles that'll occur. My little grandson has sparkles, and you know, and it's those are fun to see. So, I don't know sometimes what these things mean. There are symbols. I've seen the Christian cross in auras. I've seen the Star of David. I've seen all kinds of different symbols of which I don't know the answers. Dora Kuntz has a wonderful book on auras that explains probably much. Depression, I just want to speak briefly about depression. All emotions are contagious. But depression is a very sneaky little thing. I have watched it flood a room. It just is this brown yuck that just floods a room, and the person doesn't want to be depressed, but they are intensely depressed, and it just kind of touches everyone. On the other hand, you know, as we well know, someone can be very upset, and it's catching. We feel it. We can feel the vibration.
Hi, I'd like to know how close intuition and clairvoyance are with one's steps before that, because when you feel you have the intuition about what's happening, and you know. So are you developing clairvoyance? Is it how it goes?
I don't know how I developed it.
No,
So
I'm not asking about you. I'm asking about general.
I-
Because that
I-
concerns me.
yeah. I think if our intent is of being helpful and of being our purpose is to do good things, are we not attempting our own development of our higher self, a development of our higher consciousness? I think, in my experience, the really intuitive people sometimes have very difficult lives, and because they're having great difficulty marrying the two of this life and this intuition, they don't know how to deal with the intuitive part of things. Are they more evolved necessarily in the person who doesn't have the intuition? I don't know if I could. No, I don't think so. I think there are some, where are we in the step of humanity? When I've had experiences where I've watched someone, and you've all had the experience of being with someone who was quite disabled, and I remember a couple of examples of seeing just out watching someone who was as disabled as you can be, have no ability to control anything, a child, and the mother or someone was pushing them, but right beside it was the person, just kind of popped out of there and big smile on his or her face and said, "Aren't I doing well?" I thought, wow, isn't that cool? It gave me a whole different, this is in my youth, this is a whole different idea of, we've all been maybe the homeless, or we've all been, we're incarnating as we need to incarnate. And so here was this person. I've also seen people in the same situation where I couldn't find the person at all. I only saw the disability. So I don't know what that meant. But I've never forgotten that, aren't I doing well? I thought, wow, good.
I have another question here. Someone commented on how much they enjoyed your talk, and it reminds him of the saying, "I feel that I have two eyes to look and a third eye to see." Is clairvoyance similar or close to non-judgmental witnessing awareness?
I like that. I like that. Sight for me is not when I'm looking at the person at all. Sight is, they just, in our teachings, they describe it as the third eye. It's the opening of that yeah. I liked what he said, or she said.
There's still another one while people here are thinking. You mentioned a downside. Would the worst aspect be that of sensing things that you would rather not sense? Wouldn't acceptance be the challenge in such a case?
Let's see. Well, balance is positive and negative. So there's a positive and negative to everything. the life and the death is really, I mean, we really don't, I mean, we're born, yes, but we really don't die because we just continue just without this physical body. What's difficult is when it hurts. There's a certain level sometimes of negativity that's very painful. So that is a downside to sensitivities, and we've all had them. Whether you had sight or not, you've all had the experience of walking into a room and doing an about face because it wasn't an atmosphere you wanted, because it hurt. It hurt at some level. So do I need to accept the hurt? Well, I think I agree that acceptance, I do accept there's a positive and negative, but I just don't want to live in the negative.
A long question. I'm what some people refer to as a negative psychic, not clairvoyant, as I don't see beyond the physical, but clairsentient, with almost no conscious control over it. Sometimes I have a very hard time keeping other people's energy from overwhelming me. Do you have any suggestions?
I do. Meditation, asking for help, and creating a force field. We have the ability to cocoon, and again, you visualize yourself in a protected state, always with the top open. You're not alone. There are many of us who attract negative like a magnet. And maybe this lifetime, what you're learning is how to channel the negative away from you. But you're not alone. I have people who come in to see me for this very, very thing.
Another question. I have clairvoyant moments that are uncontrolled. Are there practices you would recommend to bring more mindfulness to the experience?
Meditation is my only answer, because meditation, the practice of meditation creates a safety and a way for you to gain the most information with the least negative impact. When I'm in my most uncomfortable state, we all have transitions, I rely entirely on a practice of, I have several, if I'm having trouble meditating, I have music I can listen to that helps take me out of it, or I have, I have used the Lord's Prayer when I have been in a very difficult time. It's wonderful because I can just repeat it like rote. Dora had a wonderful thing that she suggested to people that I have used many, many times, and it are simply the words, "I am the light." And when my husband had a massive brain bleed 15 years ago, I'm sure that is the only thing that got me through it, was repeating continuously, "I am the light, I am the light." It's a chant that is very transformative. Find the practice, to whomever is asking, find the practice that works for you. Have many different practices in a basket and just take them out. I've helped people cross several times. I've been very fortunate in my life to have been able to help people leave this physical planet. And I remember very, very vividly a family, a man and a woman, elderly. They wouldn't mind. George Linton passed away, and Dulcie, his wife. I mean, these were wonderful neighbors of ours, and wonderful theosophists, and wonderful people in my life. And I became, close to them throughout my life. And Dulcie was on the edge of passing many, many times, but George just died one day. And I know because George said, well, I've got to help her over. And I helped move Dulcie from one facility to another, and then helped in that particular time. But at the very end, her difficulty was that she couldn't meditate. She didn't know, she couldn't remember how to meditate. And so we just started saying, I asked which prayer did she know, and it was the Lord's Prayer, and she was that's all she needed. So she just started using that, and she was gone the next morning. Gary's father had Alzheimer's, and we were at the end, and I remember I was driving home, and I thought, gee, I needed to go see him. And it was one of those clear moments. And I'm going to cry because it was just so, he was just there. And I just told him all those things you want to tell him, what a wonderful father-in-law he was. He was how much I loved him. And I just said, Arnold, do you remember your prayer? And his prayer was Norwegian. And he just started speaking his prayer, and he was gone the next day. So have your basket of lots of different things, and just say, oh, let's see, I remember that chant that woman suggested that one time, or that sound, the Tibetans. There's so many different ways that we can just, or a picture, a lovely picture.
I have a friend who has been diagnosed with bipolar, but she has had also a huge spiritual crisis in this last couple years. Several tragic events in her life, including the loss of her husband in a fire. And she wants to develop her clairvoyant abilities. Like, that's what she feels, because she's a little directionless, but then she's centered on this and said, that's what I want to do. I want to help people, especially people who've lost loved ones. And I'm wondering about the protection piece, because from what I know, I feel like she's susceptible to not so helpful energies. And so I'm just curious, what are those energies? Because I don't really understand that realm, but and how do you protect yourself? How would she protect herself from them? And what are they doing? What are they trying to do? I guess lots of questions.
I am asked a lot, tell me how you do it. What are the steps? And we develop as we can develop, and we cannot try to push the envelope. That's when we get into trouble. When we try to do something that we're not really able to do, and that's when we attract often the negative energies. I think if I were her friend, I would say take a breath. Just sleep on it and trust that you'll be in best placement for you. She might be a wonderful counselor for those who have had a grief counseling. And maybe her development of sensitivities is right around the corner, and then again, maybe it's next lifetime or another lifetime. Ambition and sensitivities do not go together. It's a bad match. It's a potentially harmful match. There's some yucky things out. There's some not nice things. Not everything is beautiful. I choose to see the beauty. I choose to see the best in everyone, but there's some not such nice sides. So we need to be practical and careful. And fear is okay. It's a gift. It tells us, ooh, maybe I should stop. I'm very, very aware of fear, and I'm very respectful of it. It's telling me a good thing.